Since we last recorded, there have been ups and downs, but Spurs are back on track today after a 2-0 win up at the Villa. This is your e-Spurs podcast. Hi everyone, welcome back to the e-Spurs podcast. If I was to tell you how much effort it's taken us to get this podcast on air, you probably wouldn't believe me, but we are back and it's been a week where we took a break, and what a podcast we've got for you tonight. Don't forget, we want you guys to get involved in the e-Spurs podcast wherever you're listening to us from around the world, and stay in touch with all things e-Spurs. We are of course on Twitter and Instagram at e_Spurs, on Facebook /e-Spurs page, and new for this season, you can now follow us on both Google Plus and YouTube. As I always say, for the links for those sites and social media platforms, guys, just head to our website. That's www.espurs.blogspot.co.uk. Tonight on a bumper e-Spurs podcast, we'll turn back the clock and get the thoughts of the team on the West Ham, Arsenal, Dortmund and Villa games. I'll be putting your social media questions to the panel on all things THFC. We'll tell you how you can get your hands on this season's away shirt in our latest competition, and if all that wasn't enough, we'll squeeze in a preview of an uphill Europa task against Dortmund and the Premier League encounter against Bournemouth. Are you ready for this? But before we get into that, let's introduce the team and welcome back three very familiar voices to you all by now. It's Jason, John and Ricky. How you doing, fellas?
All right, mate.
All good, mate. All good.
All good, thanks, Andy.
Great stuff. And as I said earlier on, guys, these lads have shown a huge amount of patience in getting this podcast up and running this week. It's taken a lot of time and effort, but we are back. And before we kick off with the podcast, a few reminders for everybody. Don't forget that we now put out 2 podcast episodes each and every week. On Mondays, you can catch your usual e-Spurs podcast. And on Thursdays, don't forget to catch our brand new extra time offering, featuring the e-Spurs talking point each and every week. Also, our competition to get your hands on this season's away shirt is still open and couldn't be easier to enter, to be honest. All you have to do is to head to our Twitter or Facebook pages, find the competition post at the top of those pages, and all the instructions are there for you to enter. Literally, all you have to do is to retweet and follow the page, or like and share the page on Facebook. We're also really pleased to announce that the e-Spurs FanFone is back and ready to take your messages on all things THFC. This is our dedicated phone line, guys, where you can leave your thoughts on the podcast or anything THFC. We want you guys to get involved, as we always say, and now you can do. So you can have your messages played back on the following week's podcast. So if you've got something you want to get off your chest but you're struggling to fit it into 140 characters, then give the e-Spurs FanFone a call. Leave your message on the answer phone system and we do the rest. So a great way for you guys to get in touch and leave your thoughts on the show, on anything THFC from the previous week. That's all there for you. I'll be giving you the number in just a moment for that. Now, we could start by obviously focusing on the West Ham, Arsenal, Dortmund game from the previous week. There's so much for us to cover, but tell you what, let's start on a positive, shall we? Let's start on the Aston Villa win today. Great win by the lads and much needed confidence and morale boost after the previous week. It was pretty much as comfortable as it's going to get, I think, in a Premier League game. Let's go to Rick first up on this one. Rick, should it have been more?
Well, you could argue it should have been more, but then looking towards the end of the game, Villa had quite a few chances, and it felt like Spurs tried to be Spursy and try and throw it away, but thankfully we held on. I thought, team-wise, we played quite well. It's difficult to kind of judge it against Villa because of Villa's status in the league. I mean, they're all but relegated. But having said that, there's been times in the past where we've seen Tottenham teams be labelled as the favourites, expected to steamroll a tide and come out and disappoint. But thankfully, this Spurs side wasn't complacent. Some maybe will turn around and say that his selection midweek was vindicated because we got the result today. If I just want to touch on a few things. Harry Kane, 18 Premier League goals now in his last 21. He's outscored Gareth Bale, who some thought we may never replace. And I thought Kane came back to his best for me today.
Yeah.
I think many in the past were criticising him. Not criticising him, but saying that maybe the goals were drying up. He looked a little bit lethargic, but he shut those ones up today that have criticised him because, again, the performance today was superb. I thought Dele Alli, although he had quite a quiet game, the awareness he showed for the first goal to take the quick free kick to release Kane was a bit of genius. The awareness to spot him was superb. And Toby Alderweireld, I don't know how many times we can say this, but if he is not the signing of the season, then I don't know what to say. Again, so composed, so I don't know how to describe it, but he's just looks so carefree on the ball. He's so relaxed. And, we forget we've got Vertonghen to come back in because him and Wimmer have been sensational. They really, really have been. And Kyle Walker, for me, I thought he had a really, really good game today. I think criticised sometimes because him as a player loves to get forward but doesn't necessarily like to do the defensive side of the game. I thought he played very, very well. And we had to get the result. We got the result. 8 cup finals to go.
Yeah, it certainly is. And then just touching on your point about Alderweireld there, I mean, it's probably the biggest compliment you can pay to any defender, certainly, is that he performs so well that at times you hardly notice he's there. Does everything. He's a ball-playing defender. He does everything you could ask of him, and he likes going forward as well. At times we've seen a few goals that he scored recently. It's fantastic to have him. And Wimmer, alongside him, as you mentioned there, Rick, he's been fantastic. Just slotted in there as if he's been there all his life. It's been fantastic. Jay, in terms of the game today, was that about as comfortable as you're going to get a Premier League game?
I think so. I mean, Villa, other than the last few minutes and that one little chance they had in the first half that they hit straight at Hugo, they just never really looked in the game. And you kind of thought despite all the bravado before the game, once we got the 2 goals, you kind of got the impression that the players themselves knew that this game was won, and that realistically Villa were never going to come back into it. And I thought it was very, very comfortable, and perhaps we missed a chance to even open up an even bigger gap on the goal difference, because I thought once we got the second goal, we had a little spell just after that, and I said to the guy next to me, I can see us going on to get a third and get a fourth, but the last 20 minutes we kind of just played it out. But maybe that was a little bit of Pochettino and the players thinking, a little bit of game management, a little bit of fitness management. Let's just keep the ball, knock it around, try not to use up too much energy, and keep ourselves as fresh as we can do.
Yeah, it was a great team performance today. I think the hunger they showed, especially in the first 10 minutes, was fantastic. After that defeat in Dortmund in midweek, a lot of people thought the heads might be down, but first 10 minutes, they really blew Aston Villa away, didn't they? Could have scored a few there. John, in terms of Aston Villa and their performance, I mean, there were a few worrying moments towards the end of the game where Villa could have gone close. Would you put that down to complacency, or was it almost, do you think, too easy?
I think well, first of all, I'm going to try and keep my answers brief because my voice is going. But I think what happened really is after an hour, it just turned into like a training ground exercise. And I think that was probably maybe complacency, but I'd like to think it was more like what Jay said, and where, there's no need to go all out. As much as another couple of goals for the goal difference would have been good. We've got an important game coming up Thursday, and then again Sunday we go again. So if we can win games comfortably, keep clean sheets and not expand too much energy, then at this stage of the season, I think that's a positive, definitely.
Yeah, it certainly is. And, I mean, they did stroll through the game, didn't they, today? It was about as comfortable, I think, as you're going to see a Premier League game. Hugo Lloris had almost nothing to do. Villa went close a couple of times at the end there, but as I say, but it was pretty secure there. 2 points now off the top, Rick, with Leicester having a game in hand. Can you see now Arsenal catching Spurs, or is it a case of the top two are the top two for the rest of the season now?
Well, I think we have to give a mention that obviously Arsenal's cup defeat today isn't going to boost them.
Terrible shame that, wasn't it? Terrible shame.
Well, the thing is, like I say, I mean, they've got Barcelona during the week. I mean, with the thing with Arsenal, which you can never predict, is sometimes when they do have their backs up against the wall, they do towards the end of the season go on a magnificent run and go unbeaten and win games consecutively. But the fact that the matter is now that Spurs have got that 6-point cushion, 7, if you probably look at the inferior goal difference as well. Listen, we've not finished above them for God knows how many years, so I don't want to sit here and say that we're definitely going to finish above them. But as a Spurs fan, I think we should keep looking up rather than down. Leicester are the ones really, everyone's talking about Leicester now, because I've said it before, like Spurs, like Leicester, none of our players have been under this pressure before. There's 8 games to go. It's 8 cup finals. It's who blinks first, who is going to slip up. I still think there's going to be slip-ups, in these next 8 games. I don't think Leicester are going to win 8 in a row. I don't think Spurs are going to win 8 in a row. So it's going to be a very, very topsy-turvy finish, and it is going to come down to who is going to be the consistent team towards the very end. But again, I don't want to sit here and rule Arsenal out, because they are one of those sides that, we're going to come on to the game that we played against them. But when you've got players such as the calibre as Ozil, Sanchez, you've always got a chance. So there's so much still to play for, so many twists and turns, I still think. But yeah, we should be looking up rather than downwards. The minimum it looks like now for Tottenham fans to look forward to is hopefully going to be Champions League football in our last season at White Hart Lane before its redevelopment. And I think before the season, if you offered a Spurs fan that, they would have grabbed it. But we can't deny that there may be something bigger, waiting for us at the end. But there's still a lot more work to do. And as long as we don't get complacent and focus on the goal, which obviously is trying to go for the title, then anything is possible.
Twists and turns all the way, isn't it, as you say? And I can see a lot happening when you look at the fixtures we've got coming up. We've got those big away games we mentioned, but who's to say we can't do it? We saw the win at Man City earlier on in the season. Fantastic win there. So who's to say we can't go to Anfield and get a win? Who's to say we can't beat Manchester United at home? I'm actually feeling quite confident. I don't want to tempt fate, but I'm feeling quite confident about that one. So it's a lot still to come. Jace, are you thinking now top four pretty much secure, or is there still quite a bit of work to do before we can be confident of Champions League?
I think we're in an extremely strong position, but I would never be arrogant enough to say we've sewn it up until it's mathematically possible. But I'd certainly sooner be in our position than any of the other clubs. Obviously, with West Ham and Man United's draw today, that's an extra game for them. We put a little bit more extra distance between ourselves and those other clubs. I think, Bournemouth is a real big one for us next week. If we win that one, then I think you're pretty much then across the line, just because if you work it out how many points become available.
Yeah, as each game goes by, Jay, you're kind of looking at it now, aren't you? Sort of, as you say, counting those points down almost, and with the other teams' results sort of going our way as they have done the last game or so, especially that Man City draw, which was fantastic against Norwich for us. Leicester have got what is now quite a tough game against Newcastle on Monday night. It's hard, isn't it? You've got to try and keep a bit of a balanced perspective on it. We don't want to get carried away, as you say, and it's looking promising again after that little blip we had. And talking about that blip, lads, John, in terms of the West Ham game, the Arsenal game, a lot of questions after those games and Dortmund in midweek. Do we just put that down to a blip in our season, or would you say there's bigger concerns to come out of those three games?
Well, I personally think we was always going to suffer maybe a little mini slump between now and the end of the season, and hopefully that's it, and we've overcome it, and the games that we've got left, it won't happen again. But I think if you was to look at them games in isolation, you'd be disappointed in terms of, obviously we got 1 point from those two. But considering we won the previous 6 league games, it then turns into played 8, won 6, drawn 1, lost 1. And then if you think, well, that's a slump, then we've got nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I was looking at it in terms of, the bigger picture. I was gutted, obviously, to lose at West Ham and dropping points against Arsenal when we was in a good position and leading in the game. But it's still not anything to worry about, I don't think. We got back on track today, and it's a game where, we should have won. We did. It was a good professional performance, even though yet another goalkeeper has had their best game of the season against us, which seems to be happening a lot recently. But I think when you look at it, if you look, it's still only one defeat in a fair few in the league. It's nothing to worry about, I would say. We was always going to lose 1 or 2 more, possibly, and let's hope that, that's it now. We won't lose more than 4 league games, and if we don't lose any more games this season, then first is a real possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And just touching very quickly, Rick, on the Arsenal game there, so unlucky, wasn't we? I mean, at 2-1, you're kind of thinking there's only one winner in the game after that great goal, and you could, I guess, describe Arsenal's goal as lucky. The goalkeeper maybe could have done better on that one, but it's hard to criticise him after the season that he's just had. But in a North London derby, I guess and the West Ham game for that matter, any London derby, you can pretty much toss a coin and see who comes out on top.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But on the spate of the 3 games that obviously some are calling a mini blip, what we need to remember is it was the first time that Spurs went 3 games without a win all season. And also, furthermore, it was the first time in the Dortmund game that we actually suffered a loss by more than a 1-goal margin. So that tells you how hard and difficult Spurs have been to beat this season. In terms of the Arsenal game, I think going 1-0 down at half-time was disappointing because we played very, very well in the first half. Their goal came out of nowhere. And I think at half-time, if someone said to you, would you maybe take a point, you probably would have argued yes. But then in the second half, to go 2-1 up, that ecstasy when Kane scored, of course, it's bitterly disappointing against your rivals to not see the game out. And the concern, I think, that game was that we seemed to tire towards the end and they got stronger. And that was with them having 10 men. So that was the concern. But listen, I've seen many Spurs sides against Arsenal. I think we all have that have taken the lead, lost the lead, and ended up going on to lose it. So it was important that we didn't lose the game, number one. We still came away with a point. The West Ham game for me was disappointing because for all West Ham's dominance, they only scored via a set piece. They didn't actually break us down on any goals. They scored off a set piece. Chadley, lazy for me. You would know before the corner was taken who is the player that's going to let you down from a set piece. You knew it was going to be Chadley because he doesn't switch on. He does not switch on. Don't get me wrong, I love Chadley because he's an enigma of a player, can score a goal at any moment. But at the times when you need him to be disciplined, stick to a player, don't foul, mark your player, he always seems to let you down. And that's the frustration. And the West Ham game, what I felt is, it felt like West Ham out-Spurs because they really did press us. And I don't think we can have any complaints about the result. The Dortmund game, which I know we're going to come on to, was frustrating because I think based on his team selection, he already made his mind up for me in terms of what he saw as the priority. He felt the league was the priority. If you're going to field Mason and Carroll in the heart of your midfield, then for me, you've already made your mind up as to where you see the competition.
Just coming on to the Dortmund game there, Rick, I know it's a game that a lot of Spurs fans could feel quite strongly about at the moment, Jay. And Pochettino was quoted after the game as saying he put a side out to win that game in Dortmund. Would you agree with that?
No, I don't think so at all. I think he probably got the result that he went there for, but maybe not the scoreline he went there for. I think when you saw that team, you thought, do you know what? I think we've almost thrown the towel in here, and we're picking a side that might put up a bit of a fight and might put up a tight game, but it's never, ever, ever going to be good enough to beat a really, really impressive Dortmund side. So I think, in a weird way, it's hard to criticise the man when he's got the result that he went there for. But for me, it was it just wasn't the right thing to do. I know people talk about the bigger picture and things like that, but it was such a big European night for us to test ourselves on. I think with Aston Villa playing today, we've seen just how easy it's been to win at Aston Villa, and I think there's more of a case of saying the side that started Dortmund could have started the Aston Villa game.
Yeah.
And we could have gone there and had a go, Dele Alli apart. But, there were certain parts of it, if we've gone there and we're not really going to have a go at the game, it was even more bizarre to then see Harry Kane coming on when we were 3-0 down. Because you think, well, if we're trying to avoid players getting injured, what is the point now of bringing him on at 3-0 down? And the only other part I would say is I felt really sorry for Mason and Carroll because they got dug out by a hell of a lot of the critics on there. But for me, the primary reason was that Son and Chadley just didn't press high up the pitch at all. And Dortmund were just coming through us, and so often during the game you had 4 or 5 coming straight through to Carroll and Mason. And, that's hard if that had been Dyer and Dembele to stem the flow of 5 top class players. But for it to be down to Carroll and Mason, I thought was a bit harsh to really criticise their performances.
Yeah, it was a strange one, John, and it's hard, as we've mentioned there, to criticise the guy, Pochettino, because he's done so well for us this season. But would you say a lot of the criticism was justified from Thursday that went his way?
Well, I personally think it was, yeah. I mean, when you're talking about how much it would have cost the fans to travel, it's not cheap supporting your club throughout Europe. And I think if you're looking, I know that's not his obviously primary concern, but as a fan, that's the way I sort of see it first. And you think, as Jay just said, it's like he's set up for a defeat, and it was open. If we bring them back to White Hart Lane, maybe only 1 down, get Villa out of the way, and then have a real go. But it didn't work at all, did it? I think the only positive I could take from Thursday is the fact that due to UEFA regulations about sponsor size, there's a little bit less red on our shirt because the AIA is a little bit smaller. It's in the league. But other than that, there's not really much you could, it was just a bad night. It's not one that, unfortunately, the draw come out. We was all excited about it, and it's just flopped. It's not gone the way we hoped it would go, but, stranger things have happened, and we'll give it a right good go on Thursday, I'm sure. Although I'm not sure, if I was him, would you now go, right, that's it, the tie's finished, let's just get it out of the way, give the same lads another go, and, save the big boys, as you'd say, for Sunday in Bournemouth. I think that's really the only question now for me.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate, isn't it? And I'm sure it's one that we could, take up most of the podcast with, Rick. But it'd be interesting. I think Jace made a comment during the week. It'd be interesting to see what happens maybe next season, whether or not Pochettino approaches European competition the same if we're in the Champions League, for example. If we're still going for the top four again next season, will he rotate again in the Champions League and rest players for league games? Because you're talking Europa League, all right, it's arguably the second rank competition. But it's still a competition which we, could go potentially all the way in. We could have gone potentially all the way in. And that's where I think a lot of the frustration comes from. So it'd be interesting to see next season how he chooses to approach the Champions League, bearing in mind there's pretty much the same distance between games. Thursday, Sunday is pretty much the same as playing, well, it's exactly the same as playing Wednesday, Saturday.
Well, we hope not. He's going to take. We hope not. If we're lucky enough to be in the Champions League, that he would treat it the same. But I think the frustration is that the Dortmund fixture in itself was like a Champions League game. Dortmund are not a second-tier team. Look at them in their league, all right, behind Bayern Munich, but I think they're like 12, 15 points clear of third place. So they're not a second-tier team. And what I think was the frustration is that I feel sorry, like John just said, for the fans that have already bought a ticket for the return leg before we've even played. What's that ticket worth now? Because it certainly isn't going to be worth the face value of £45. Listen, I love Spurs. I believe we can do anything. But 3-0 down against that Dortmund side, I just don't see how we can turn that around. And he's got a very big decision to make now come the weekend, because Bournemouth are one of the form teams in the Premier League. I think they've taken 12 points from a possible 15. So Bournemouth aren't going to be any pushover, and they're going to come to White Hart Lane. And for them, I think they're already safe. So that might suit us in the case that they might not sit back, they might have a go, but you're going to argue and say that we're going to have our best 11 out, and there'll probably be again calls for Tottenham to put their best 11 out on Thursday, because I can't see how he can justify not putting his best 11 out when we may be going out of Europe. So he's got a very tough decision to make, and I don't think he needs to do it. I think that's the thing. He didn't need to do it, because Aston Villa, like you said today, the performance they had, I mean, we could have got away with not playing our strongest team. So I felt this particular scenario would have been avoidable, but I can't see how he's going to play the best 11 against Dortmund on Thursday and then the best 11 again against Bournemouth on the Sunday. So he's got a very big decision to make, and I hope he picks it right, because for me, I don't see how we're going to turn around the Dortmund tie. And as we know, Premier League games, they're all cup finals now. So we must get 3 points against Bournemouth. But he's given himself a tricky decision.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, as you mentioned, that the team that he puts out on Thursday, whether or not he decides to go for it, whether or not he thinks the tie's gone, he wants to rest players for Bournemouth. As I say, it's so difficult to criticise the guy because he's had a great season, and they have done so well. But there are those small moments, aren't there, where a few of the substitutions where you kind of question, and that game, certainly on Thursday night, which was a bit deflating to say the least, wasn't it? But listen, guys, if you are listening to the show tonight and you want to get involved, as I mentioned earlier, you can on the e-Spurs FanFone. So if you've been listening to Ricky, John and Jace tonight on the podcast and you want to have your say, if you want to get something off your chest about the game on Thursday night, if you want to pick one of the lads up on one of the points they've made, you can now do so. Give us a call, guys, on 07497 148049. That's from the UK. If you're outside the UK, call 447 497 148049. Of course, I give those numbers again at the end of the podcast, but get in touch with us and we'll play those messages back on the podcast next week. So a great way for you guys now to get involved with the podcast. I have got some questions for the lads which have been sent in to us. Every week we ask for questions via the social media for Jason, John and Ricky, and every week, guys, you come up trumps with some really great questions. So just to fire a few of those at the lads tonight, let's have a look at what we've got tonight. First up, let's go to Jace first up. Why do you think, this is from Kev Green at Kev_G1, why do you think our conversion rate from attempts on target to goals is poor and has been all season?
I think probably one of the key things for me is that a lot of our shots are from outside the box anyway, or we're not necessarily getting that many chances in and around the 6-yard box.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you're starting to shoot from outside the box, there's more chance of them being blocked. There's more chance of the keeper setting himself. And so I think that's probably the primary reason. And then, are we clinical enough? We definitely aren't. And we've seen that even this afternoon with Harry. He had 4 chances before he actually took one today. So, and we certainly don't want to get on the back of Harry at all, because he's still having a fantastic season and proven he's certainly not a one-season wonder. But I think that's probably the big thing. We don't, for all our shots there are, I think when you look back at the end of a normal Spurs game, you still say to yourself, how many really clear-cut chances did we have where you kind of say, you have to score? There's a difference in chances for me. There's ones where you say you got to work the goalkeeper, and then there's chances where you say you have to score. And I always worry a little bit when we get to the end of a game. I look back at it and I think, well, there was probably only 1 or 2 chances where you'd say you had to score rather than you had to work the goalkeeper.
Jace, what do you make of our corner kicks? They seem to struggle to get past the first man, don't they?
Well, we had this one, didn't we, a few weeks ago, and certainly it's a bugbear of me for every single Premier League team that I watch. Because, all right, we focus very much on Tottenham and where we, our corners and lack of them. But, I mean, I see the Norwich-Manchester City game yesterday. I don't think there was a single corner in the whole game that was a decent corner.
Yeah.
And it's just a really weird thing for me about Premier League footballers. And it's not, to me, down to how much money they earn. I don't care if you're earning £200,000 a week and people say you should be able to kick a corner. For me, it's a case of you're on the training ground 5 days a week, and therefore you should be able to take a corner. But, we have scored from more set pieces than any other club this year. So it's a strange one. But, I mean, you've always got to look to improve it, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's interesting, isn't it? Christian Eriksen, I mean, you'd struggle to find a better free kick taker than Eriksen in the league. And yet corners, it's such a strange one that he can't get that precise corner over. In contrast, Eric Lamela seems, when he's on the corners, certainly seems to get a good corner over normally. So at least there's someone in there that can get the cross in. Next question let's go to John on this one, from Ian Gunn, who was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. How you doing, Ian? He asked, John, the Saido Berahino link seem to be getting stronger. Do you think it will finally happen, and what attributes will he bring?
I think a lot of it really depends on whether we do get Champions League football, because if we do, I'd like to think that there'd be a player out there, a better player that we'd end up going for. So I think that's the first thing. But if he was to come, like we said many times before, I think the fact that he's played with Harry for the England under-21s is a bonus, and he's a kind of sort of like a Jermaine Defoe type player. He's small, he's dynamic, he's got a good shot on him. He's, as we've seen recently, he's been in pretty good form for West Brom, and he's a good finisher. Obviously, it's something that we've lacked at certain times throughout this season, where, especially at the start when Harry Kane didn't score until we played Man City, which was, I think, the 6th or 7th game or whatever it was. So, it would have, a second striker, as we've said 1,000 times, would have come in handy. But I think with Berahino especially, I think maybe Pochettino's targets will change. Like I said, if we do win the league or qualify for the Champions League, then I don't think Berahino's kind of a next level player. I don't see he's any better than Harry Kane. And really, I think what we need is, as well as someone who can play with him, it's someone to push Harry, because although he's been on this magnificent run, and we've said so many times, he looks tired, he looks lethargic, but his stats don't lie.
Top scorer now, John, with Vardy, isn't he?
Exactly. It's not bad for a one-season wonder, is it? And I think when you look at it like that, I think what we really need is someone who's capable of scoring those kind of numbers, which Harry is. I don't think Berahino is, to tell you the truth. I think what we need is someone who's good enough to push Harry, and to say, well, you've had a game or two where you've been a bit off, Harry. We're gonna, this guy's as good as you are. We're going to put him in instead. And I think Berahino is just another one of those players that probably isn't good enough. It's the same as Defoe. He was there for so long and loyal for so long. but he was hardly ever first choice striker, was he? You know, we always had Keane and Berbatov and players like that, and you know, even Darren Bent was in front of him for a while, and Pavlyuchenko and what have you. So I don't know. I mean, and let's be honest as well. For the 20-odd million, I think I never would have been keen to pay that kind of money for him, although it's not my money. But if the fee's reduced and it's 10, 15 million, then maybe yeah. But he could end up being a third choice possibly if he does come. If we do end up signing a Champions League class striker, someone who's been there before. I watched PSG this afternoon, and Ibrahimovic is available on a free. He got 4 goals today. 35 goals he's got. He's 34 years old. He's not. He's one. You know what I mean? I'm not saying we should go out for necessarily a world class player or a player that scored a ton of goals in foreign leagues, because we've had our fingers burnt before with players like Soldado. So I don't know. We'll see. I think if Pochettino wants him, obviously, and he goes for him, then I'll back him 100%. But I think maybe if we get Champions League football, it could be a better player that we end up going for.
Yeah, I'd love to see Ibrahimovic there. I'm not sure if he's a Levy signing at his age, though, is he? And the wages he's gonna command. But it'd be fantastic, wouldn't it?
He'd sell shirts. I know that.
Certainly would. He certainly would sell shirts. But then I guess so would Moutinho and all of those others that we let slip. It's that's for another podcast maybe. But yeah, it's certainly Berahino would certainly do a job. I know Jace is, as many times on the podcast has mentioned, that we should get him in if we can get him in, that he can do a job in there. And we will see. He certainly seems to have made the peace with Jeremy Peace, doesn't he? And become pal again all of a sudden. So whether or not there's anything in that, who knows? But it does seem to have come out of nowhere, doesn't it? So maybe there's something going on that we don't know about. Who knows? We'll watch this space, guys. And last question for tonight's show for Rick. It's from Harry Charalambus at PrimeSpur 1992, and he says, should Poch stop doing double training sessions so late in the season? Some players like Dele Alli look knackered, and will our form pick up again?
Well, I think the thing is, just in regards to that question, I think if you look at the stats, I think Spurs have scored more late goals than anyone and have recovered more points than any Premier League team. I think it's 18 now. So who are we to question his training methods based on the results we've had this season in terms of the late goals, in terms of being able to recover as many points as we have done? Personally, I don't see any of the players coming out saying it's harming them or hurting them. So if it works for the players, it works for the manager, then I would leave it as it is. I can't see why we look to change something that's working. It's working, so why change it? Yeah,
absolutely. It seems to be working. And as you mentioned there, the most crucial thing is these late goals we seem to get, which are vital, really, in the scheme of things. I think one frustration is that sometimes it takes us going behind to kick up another gear and then suddenly need to score. But they're doing it, aren't they? They're managing to come back by hook or by crook. So while it's working, don't try and change it, I think is the message. And of course, guys, as I said earlier, if you're listening and want to get in touch, if you want to have your say on any of those questions, give us a call on 07497 148 049, and you can have your say on any of those talking points on the podcast tonight. So let's move on to a busy week ahead. Again, another crucial week and an interesting one in the Dortmund game, because of course we're going to find out how Pochettino decides to play his hand. Is he going to go with a weakened side and give up the tie, or is he going to put a side out that makes a statement and really goes for the game? Jace, what do you see happening in this one in terms of team selection?
Well, I think based on last week and based on the situation we're in, I think you look at Bournemouth, who I think have the stats that they've run further than even we have this year. So I think that the position that we're in, I think the tie's gone. And, I've really criticised him last week for the selection. But, this week you might as well just shrug your shoulders and think, OK, let's even play Vorm in goal, because the tie's gone. And I think we could be chasing the game Thursday and still actually end up losing the game itself on Thursday night, regardless of the actual tie.
Yeah.
Dortmund, you can see, they're a serious team with goals in them, and you could be chasing it for all you want, and you can still actually get beat 2-0, 2-1 on the night. So for me, I think just accept that the tie has gone, and now just really have to concentrate on next Sunday.
Yeah, John, would you agree with that? Would you focus solely now on Bournemouth?
It's a tough one because I'm going on Thursday, so I'd like to see us have a real go. But I think it's sort of similar to what happened in the Champions League when we got beaten 4-0 at Real Madrid. And we played a full 11 for the return game, and we lost 1-0. And what happened after that, I don't know if you remember, but the following game after the Real Madrid return game was a North London derby, which we drew. And we went on a run of 5 without a win after that. And we only won our last 2 games of the season to get into 5th place.
John, there's a point in there, isn't there, in what you're saying, in that going out of Europe doesn't necessarily mean your league form's going to improve?
Well, it didn't last season, did it? I mean, after we went out to Fiorentina and then the cup final came and went, it wasn't great after that. You know, the intensity seems to slack off a little bit, and there were times where you think maybe that this, you know, because they are such a young group of players, they can, you know, all the time the momentum is continuing and they're playing every 3 or 4 days. They get used to it. And maybe when they have that bit of an extended rest between games, for some reason, a bit of the intensity gets lost.
Yeah.
And, I feel that's what happened last time. And I just hope that this season doesn't fizzle out because of that. I know we've got a lot more to play for this time. But at the same time, the stakes are a lot higher than they were before. So let's say, you know, it's going to be an interesting end, whatever happens. I just hope that, you know, if we was to miss out on Champions League football now, that'd be awful. You know, it'd be from the best season ever to the worst. And you know, I shouldn't be thinking like that.
Yeah.
But I support Tottenham Hotspur. You know, it's natural. I keep waiting for this sort of implosion to occur, and I thought maybe, you know, the last 3 games before today weren't great, obviously, and if we'd have gone to Villa and not won, and you think, we're in trouble. But, you know, good result today. And I think he'll go sort of a bit stronger than he did last week. But I still expect maybe Chadley up front. And like was just said, then I wouldn't be surprised to see Vorm in goal. And I think Trippier will play and Carroll will play, Mason will play. But I don't know, I just hope we have a go. Even if we lose the tie, I'd just like to win the game on Thursday. You know, go out with our heads held high and say, you know, at least we give it a go in the second leg. Give the fans something to crow about, and you know, take a bit of confidence from a win into Bournemouth on Sunday.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what side Dortmund put out also in terms of, you know, this game, because they're 3-0 up. So are they going to take their foot off the pedal slightly? Are they going to take the opportunity to rest some players? It's also interesting from that game last Thursday. Does that signal a shift in power from the Premier League to the German League? Does that show just how strong the German League is now compared to the Premier League? Or was it more a case of Spurs, you know, throwing the game pretty much?
Well, I think how I feel about that, Andy, is the fact that I still believe that, and I'll probably get abused for saying this, but we've got one of the, maybe our squad is probably only 5th or 6th best in the league, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right. Taking out, you know, what the actual league table says, you know, they say it doesn't lie, but I believe that it's not a top 4 squad that we've got probably at the moment. So, you know, for Dortmund, who are, you know, they're always going to be in the top 2 in their league. You know, they made changes on Thursday when I saw Sven Bender playing at centre half. You know, he's a midfielder, and then Derm, who, I mean, he's a good young player, but he normally plays at left back. He was on the right, and then they went and made 4 changes today for their league game and bought, you know, they bought Gundogan back and Sahin and Kagawa, players like that who weren't involved from the start last week. So, you know, their squad is good enough easily to cope with 4 changes, whereas ours still is a little bit, I wouldn't say thin, but you're going from players who are, you know, established internationals like Moussa Dembele to Tom Carroll, who's playing for his future at Tottenham, who's, you know, really not, he's been a bit of a late developer, and if he was at Dortmund, he would have been released years ago, you know. So I think if you look at it like that, we are really pretenders to their crown in that respect, and we're not a Champions League quality team at the moment. But you know, if we get in there next season and it happens again and again, we will be before too long. I don't know. I expect changes, but probably not as many, I'd say. Yeah,
it's a great shout, and we do talk on this podcast, other Spurs fans talk about the strength of the Spurs squad, but when you compare it to one of those real top class squads, the difference is clear, isn't it? And that's not to say that our lads, you know, disgraced themselves, because I think they went out there trying to win the game. The players that were out there, I think it was more that they were given a shorthand by the manager on the day, and it was unfortunate, wasn't it? But well,
it just shows how much we've overachieved domestically, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's credit to the man who made all those changes. So, you know, you win some, you lose some, don't you? And he's certainly won more than he's lost. So that's good to see. Rick, in terms of Bournemouth at the weekend, huge game again. One of these cup finals now that we've got left between now and the end of the season. They've just come off the back of another win. I think 3 wins in a row now. They're flying in the league. And we mentioned already they've run more than any other team apart from us in the league. So it's going to be a cracking game. What do you see happening in this one in terms of the styles of play of both the teams?
Well, I think Bournemouth are in the luxury now where they're all but safe, so they can come to Spurs, play relaxed, without no pressure. Again, no one's going to be expecting Bournemouth to come to White Hart Lane and win. So for them, I mean, it's carefree. They can express themselves on the ball. The worrying thing for me is they're the form team in the Premier League. So that in itself tells you, I think I said earlier, I think 12 points from a possible 15. And again, I'd say it'll be interesting to see what he does midweek in his decision for the Dortmund game in terms of selection, because I think for Sunday he's got to go in full strength. He has to, because like you've just said there, Bournemouth have run more than any other team in the Premier League. So we're going to need fresh legs. So it's no good playing the same 11 on a Thursday than doing the same thing on a Sunday. We're going to need fresh legs. So we have to go our best 11 on Sunday no matter what happens. And the game is not going to be easy. I think the fans have been very, very good at home this year in terms of being patient, waiting, because they know that this Tottenham side will find a way through. But again, I keep saying to the Tottenham fan, we always need more than a 1-goal margin, even today against Villa. Although how poor Villa were, I could never feel comfortable until we got that second goal. And then I felt, okay, we're in cruise control now, because at a 2-0 lead, this Tottenham side, they don't tend to slip up. So the start of the game is going to be the most important thing, because I think that's how the crowd react. If we start the game well, on the front foot, go at Bournemouth, get an early goal, that already changes everything. If we go 1-0 down, like we did against Swansea, and we have to try and come back, it's going to make life difficult for ourselves. But we can do it. So the most important thing really is that he puts out the best 11 possible on Sunday. Thursday, just going back to that, I mean, it's so disappointing that we don't really have, in my opinion, much to play for in that game apart from pride. So it'd be interesting to see.
Could there be, Rick? Is there any scenario that you can see us being able to get back in that one?
I think we're clutching at straws, if I'm being completely honest with you. I mean, what can we hope for? The fact we go 1-0 up early, they make a mistake, they maybe get a sending off, they go down to 10 men, and then the crowd drive us on to get another 2 goals. The Dortmund side itself, they're 12, 15 points clear in the German league.
Yeah.
So they've really got no reason to kind of rest their best players, if you see what I mean, for a league game, because they're already clear. So I would expect them to kind of go near on strength, just not to chance it in the away leg. That's the only reason that's the only way I can see really us winning the tie, if there is a sending off on Dortmund's behalf. It galvanises the Spurs crowd. Because don't get me wrong, I think we can score 3 goals. It's not like we can't score goals. It's just that Dortmund as a back 4, a back 5 or 6, they're so solid. And then you're asking yourself, well, are Dortmund not going to score? Because if Dortmund score, it's going to then be very hard for us. If they get 1, we need 4. So you can see when it gets to that stage of needing 4 goals, it's going to be very, very hard. And I've said I don't want us to kind of put our best 11 out to then play Bournemouth on Sunday, who have got a fresh team, who have run the most in the league, like we've said. So I would put a team out that will give us pride in terms of performance, and then roll on Sunday, because like we've said, we've got 8 cup finals in the league. I don't think Spurs are ever going to get a better opportunity to win this league. So yeah, all on Sunday for me, but let's hope the team he puts out on Thursday will play with a bit of pride.
Just on that, Rick, if they score, we got to score 5.
Well, there you go. Was it 5? Sorry, 5.
4-1 puts on an away goals, doesn't it?
Right,
so we've got to score 5 in that case.
What's 5,
Well, 5. We've got 1 recognised striker at the club. You know what I mean? We've got to try and find 5 goals. So, Jace tells it even there, like I say, 5 goals. It's going to be very, very hard. Let's just hope we have a Tottenham team that play with a bit of passion and can give a better performance than they did over there, because like I said again, I will say it again, I feel sorry for the fans that already booked their ticket in advance of the second leg, because I don't think those fans booked that game expecting to have a 3-0 deficit. Let's hope we go there and put a performance on, but for me, Sunday's the most important game. We have to get the team selection right and the performance.
Yeah, someone made a great point during the week. Maybe if they knew they was going to put a reserve team out, maybe they should have charged the away fans reserve team prices. But that's all, I'm sure, decided up at another level. Jay, in terms of the season to come, 8 games left now, 2 points off the top. 6 clear of Arsenal now. Obviously, they've got a game in hand. We've still got away games at Chelsea, at Liverpool, the home game against United. How many points do you think? How many wins do you think we're going to need between now and the end of the season to guarantee top 4?
I think between now and the end of the season, I think four more wins would guarantee us top 4. I think 5 wins would guarantee us automatic entry to the Champions League. And I think to win it from the 8 games, I think you're talking 6 wins, 1 draw, 1 defeat at the most. And it might even need 7 wins. Because, like I've said all along, I don't see Leicester blowing up in the way that everybody else is talking about Leicester possibly blowing up. So... But I think 4 wins and we'd definitely be in that top 4 because there's still a lot of games between the chasing clubs. You've still got City United next week. You've still got Arsenal going to West Ham. You've got West Ham going to Chelsea, which won't be an easy game. So, there's still plenty of scope for others to drop points as well.
Yeah, so many scenarios that could still take place, aren't there? We've got tomorrow night's game, of course, Monday night. You might be listening to this podcast and already know the result of that one. But, what's going to happen in that one? Benitez has changed the outlook on that game slightly in terms of, the bounce that a new team has when a manager comes in. It's all still to play for. It's all still happening. John, just to finish up on the previews, in terms of the games we've got left, I've just mentioned there the big away games we've got left. What for you is our most difficult game left this season?
Oh, that's a good one. It could end up being Stoke away, couldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I think as well this season has proved, because it has been a bit mad this season, there's no gimmies at all. And even the ones where you expect them to be difficult end up being not so difficult. Who would have said we'd have took 6 points from Man City, So I think looking at the fixtures, I think obviously, the obvious ones stand out straight away as the ones Jace just mentioned. Liverpool, Man U, Chelsea, but I think we're capable of winning all of them games. I really do, and there's no reason why we wouldn't. And I think because we have still got something massive to play for in every game now throughout the rest of the season. It's not like last season where we're out of Europe, but we'll finish 5th anyway. It's not like that this season. So I'd like to think that because there is something on every single game, we might see, that kind of intensity of performance and level of performance that we have seen more often than not this season, and be comfortable enough to, at the end of it, to have qualified for the Champions League with a few games to go, like Jay said, and then really have a good go at the league. But I know maybe not the answer you wanted, but I don't think that one game is any more or less difficult than the one before or after it, purely because the aim is the same still. There's not going to be one-off game where we need this result to achieve this. That'll come on the last day of the season where we're going to know where we're going to finish.
Yeah,
I think they're all going to be difficult. I know it's cliched, but it's the Premier League. No games are easy. But we'll just see and just enjoy the rest of the season. Hopefully, even if it ends up being just 9 more games, if we go out on Thursday as we expect to, and just enjoy it and just see where we end up.
I tell you what, I bet Pochettino was absolutely rubbing his hands today watching that Man U West Ham game and knowing that they've got another game to play, both of them.
Well, exactly. I mean, I was too. It's getting to the point of the season where things like that start to matter. You
Absolutely.
Know what I mean?
Yeah.
And obviously, Man United have still got. I mean, their return leg against Liverpool, there's more light for them at the end of that tunnel than there is for us, possibly. So that they could end up having another 2 games at least after that if they beat Liverpool. So then it becomes a real congestion, for them, and it hopefully makes our place in the top 4 that little bit more secure.
Yeah, every single game that goes by now, ticking off the points that are left, ticking off the places that we could move up to potentially. It's fascinating, isn't it? And for us Spurs fans, we've mentioned so many times on this podcast, uncharted territory. Such a long time since we were even this close. So fantastic lads. Don't forget, guys, you can get in touch with e-Spurs and let us know what you think about anything on the podcast tonight. You guys have been doing that brilliantly over the last few weeks. Some great comments on the social media, on the Twitter and on the Facebook. And of course, don't forget there's now the new e-Spurs fan phone. So if you've got anything you want to say on the podcast tonight, guys, give us a call on 07497 148 049. That's from the UK. If you're outside the UK, just drop the first 0 and add a 44. So the number becomes 447 497 148 049. And as I say, we'll play back all of the responses that we get on next week's podcast. That's it for this week, guys. good to be back. I'm sure the guys will echo that. It's taken a lot for us to get the show back on air with technical problems that we've had during the last week. I've got to thank the guys for their patience during the course of the week. They've been brilliant. So thanks, lads, for that. And for you guys for listening and keeping your questions coming on the social media. It's been brilliant to interact with everybody out there during the week. We'll be back after the Bournemouth game next weekend, guys. Don't forget to get in touch on the FanFone and to look out for Extra Time on Thursday. All things being well, we'll have the e-Spurs talking point for you. If anything changes with that, we'll post it on our social media. Other than that, guys, fingers crossed. Let's hope for a great week. And from Jason, John, Ricky and myself, have a good week. And as always, come on you Spurs.